boost the pressure to get it going, more of it to the upstairs.
So what would you guys do? Tape, mastic?
I like butyl tape.
Yeah.
I've tried mastic and it doesn't really jive with my personality type. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Rob Wadsack, Digital Brand Manager.
Hey, Patrick.
Matt Milham, Deputy Editor.
How's it going?
And our longtime and trusted producer, Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. How you guys been? It's good to see you.
Good.
Yeah, doing all right.
Projects?
Oh, yeah. Always.
You go ahead. You're first.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was in the middle of actually organizing my barn yesterday, but then around the dinner table, my wife and 14-year-old daughter were talking about this kitchen remodel that we've been hemming and hawing about for a couple of years now. And the next step is to maybe put a bigger window in before we decide where all the cabinets are going to go. And I just got up from the dinner table and grabbed a bunch of tools and ripped a bunch of cabinets off the wall.
As you do.
Yeah. And how did that go?
It was fun. It was exciting. I don't think I would have done it if it wasn't like such a spontaneous
Oh, you can't think about it too much, right?
No.
You just got to rip that Band-Aid right the heck off.
Yeah, it's the first time that in 40 years I think that drywall has seen the light of day behind it, and ripped off some of the Granny Smith apple Formica backsplash, and
you're going to be regretting you got rid of that in 10 years when that's all back in fashion, dude.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So what did you do with all the stuff that was in your cabinets? And did you set up a temporary kitchen? What's going on there?
No, well, I didn't rip out all the cabinets. This is just a couple of them around where the window's going. So I didn't destroy my entire kitchen. No, it's we had already started thinning out what was in the cabinets in anticipation of this project, and so it was really just putting a few things on the dining room table for now. But
so did you buy a window?
No, that's the next step. Well, actually, no. The next step is open up the drywall and or the siding to see what I need to do if I got to add a header for the window. It's a gable end wall, so it's not a load bearing wall on my house, but it's still going to be something I got to think about how
it might have floor load on it.
It might. That's true.
Yeah,
I got to check. Let's see. Nope. Actually, I'm looking at the floors in the room that I'm sitting in right now, and the joists run the other direction. So,
well, that's a pretty good indicator, but that's not always a truth. I can tell you from my own experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are 3 layers of flooring, and sometimes they run the same direction.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do have to think about is I think I may have told you guys a long time ago that there used to be a chimney going into my old kitchen, probably to an old cook stove, from the 1800s, and when I did I discovered this chimney when I was doing my daughter's bedroom, which is directly above the window, and the chimney would have been down into the kitchen right where the window is. So there's probably some sort of timber behind that wall that was supporting this skinny brick chimney at one point. So I don't know.
It's just sitting on the floor.
We'll see.
Well, you got to take some pictures of this, and we'll put them up on the podcast page. I want to see your kitchen in chaos. I want to I want to feel superior in some way.
Yeah, we'll be cooking on the grill for the next couple of weeks, probably.
What about you, Matt? What have you been doing?
Let's see. This past weekend, I took my front door off and repainted it. That was probably the most exciting thing. It's not really much of a project, but like almost everything else in this house, take the door off, test the paint, lead. So, I'm not going to...
So you just sanded that right off then, right?
I took some of it off. I just took off the stuff that was, peeling. The thing is, we never go through this door, so we don't really look at it. It was, in worse shape than I thought it was because I'd never really taken that close of a look at it.
Was it rotting or just peeling
no,
paint?
that's the thing. Just in terms of the paint, it almost looked like, when I started to scrape off that peeling stuff, like it had been primed and never painted. I don't know if there was such a thing as lead primer back in the day.
Oh, I imagine.
Or if they had just painted without priming, but it didn't look like there was any more than the one layer. And so just took off what was peeling and then painted it with an exterior oil-based paint. And it looks a million times better. I mean, I didn't do a great job, like really, sanding it and getting everything nice and flat after I had done some of the scraping because, again, we don't look at this door that much. And I wanted to get it back on.
Right. You can't have a hole in your house for very long.
Yeah. So, I could have done a better job, but, for what it is, I mean, it's not that attractive of a door to begin with. I would like to replace it at some time, but I was actually surprised at how well it was built and just how heavy it was. I expected it to be, I don't know, like a lot of the other stuff in this house, kind of shoddily done. But
do you think it's original to the house?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, cool. That's cool.
Yeah, so it's probably the best built thing in the entire house. It is, and the thing is, it's not sagging, but the opening that it's in is not square necessarily. So there, the gap along the top it is out about 3/16 from one side to the other, and there's really no way to deal with that without taking it out.
I think you're opening a can of worms if you start digging into that, man.
No, I don't want to. I just don't want to touch it.
Yeah. If you don't use it and it works, leave it alone. That's what I say.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeff? What have you been doing? You're still scraping and painting too?
A little bit, yeah. It's still some storm cleanup, chipping a lot of branches and wood and stuff like that.
So do you have a chipper?
Yeah.
I bet that's a fun tool to use.
It is, yeah. It's really hard on your hands and your wrists, and it's a lot of vibration. Yeah.
How big of a stick can you get into that chipper?
Probably. Well, actually, that was one of the things. I sharpened the blade, and it's a much bigger stick now, so probably like 1.5 to 2 inches. It'll chop up pretty quickly.
I bet that's quiet.
Yeah.
I had one like that for a while. I got free from a client years ago when I was remodeling, and I cranked it up once, and my wife's like, "Get that thing out of the yard." She was it was pretty scary. It was shooting chips everywhere, and
I can't imagine why that client gave it to you, right?
Right. I mean, the big ones, I'd rather use one of the big rental ones. You can throw 6-inch logs in some of those nice ones.
Yeah.
Well, the ones the utility companies, they put trees in it, logs.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I didn't have this, I wouldn't use it.
Our town's been pretty good. They've been taking all the stuff if you put it out by the side of the road, and the mountain of storm debris that's at the transfer station is mind blowing. It is like the biggest pile of mulch I have ever seen. It is incredible.
Can you go and get some for free?
Yeah. You can. There's no way if everybody in the entire town put a foot over their entire property, there would still be some left over. So you guys have known about my prolonged power outage woes, right? And I finally pulled the trigger on a transfer switch that I bought from Amazon, and it came last Friday, and I spent the weekend, probably collectively 8 hours, hooking it up and then running a cable to the exterior of the home where there's a big honking receptacle where you plug in a portable generator, and my generator is coming on Tuesday.
Nice. How big a generator are you getting?
So this is a 6,000 continuous watt sized generator, and it has 7,200 or 7,400 maximum. So I should be able to run the oil furnace, the well pump, and probably window air conditioners at night, and we could probably make a tank of hot water if we turned everything else off. So I think it's going to be quite a luxury living compared to what we've been doing when the power's been out.
Yeah.
So was it a scary job tying into? You tied directly into your service panel?
Yeah. So the transfer gear has 10 circuits in it, and ordinarily the power comes from the main service panel, goes through the switch, and most of the time it just sends it back to the circuit where it's normally on, getting line power, right? But if you flip the switch, now is getting power from the generator. And so every circuit has to have 2 connections made for 120 circuits, or if they're 240, there are actually 4 wires you have to hook up. So you're in essence interrupting the flow of electrons from the breaker to the conductor in the house, right?
Yep.
And there was, when you get electrical gear like this, the one pain in the neck thing is sometimes there's not enough room to make your connections. But the company does all that stuff inside their switch gear, and you only have to make connections from the cable that's going out to the generator. So there are 4 conductors, and there's plenty of room in the box. It was a pretty straightforward setup. I think it probably took me 3 hours to hook up the switch gear, and then probably another 3 or 4 hours to run the cable outside.
Cool.
The switchgear came from Amazon. It was about $500. The generator is $2,100. I bought a Yamaha because I figured that was not quite as expensive as a Honda, and I decided to stay away from the kind of store brand generators.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got right before a storm, and it was a good thing I had it. But, and it works fine. We just use it to run some lights and stuff, but I should get a transfer switch. And it's funny that you did that, because actually I think Mike Girton wrote me an email, I think on Sunday night, saying we should do an article on transfer switches. And
yeah,
it definitely is a good one, because especially now it seems like we're getting power outages more and more, and I'd love to have one in my house.
So interestingly, on the subject, because of my recent experience, I pitched to Brian a story on standby generators. So 2 days ago, I interviewed a guy from Generac about that subject, and I think that's definitely going to be a feature to explore. There's a lot to know, and they're expensive, right? So you want to make a good choice.
Yeah,
For sure.
I seriously thought about that, but you're talking like thousands of dollars. I think the gear starts at 4 or 5, and that doesn't include the hookup, much of which I could do myself, but not all of it.
Yeah. You're talking about one that kicks on automatically when it senses a power disruption.
Yeah. So it sits out there all the time and turns on by itself when the power is interrupted. Once a month, it turns itself on to make sure it's working and exercise. And the great thing about those is if you're away from the house on vacation and the power goes out, it's going to keep your pipes from freezing. Whereas my portable generator that I have to go out to the barn to get and wheel over to the receptacle and hook up, I have to be here to do that, right?
Right. Yeah, my in-laws have one. And the nice thing about those, I believe it runs on propane, and it's really quiet.
Yeah.
But they have even more power outages than we do, and they're only 5 miles away.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if for how much money you spent there, Patrick. I think I'd be buying like a pallet of discounted lithium ion cells and building my own version of a Tesla Powerwall.
That sounds a lot more practical, Rob. I agree. Boy, this was one of the hardest decisions I've made, honestly, and I've put it off for 10 years, right? Carol finally asked to have something done, and I think it's good to have marital bliss.
Yeah, I had the same effect when I installed the mini splits in my house. We had never had central air before, and my wife hates heat.
Being hot, yeah.
She hates heat, and so she regularly says that it saved our marriage.
That was a small price to pay, dude, I gotta say. So we got a feedback from Paul. He says, hello, I'm writing with a bit of feedback from an episode a couple months back. It bothered me at the time, but I didn't write in. So here we are. A listener asked about redoing their water piping in their home, and someone, I think Patrick, recommended learning to sweat copper and redoing the water piping in copper. As an apprentice plumber who has done quite a bit of soldering over the last couple years, I do not think that's a good idea. Sweating copper is a skill that takes a lot of time to master. I've been in many, many houses with substandard sweating that leaked or looked like it was about to. I've had pipe pull right out of fittings it was sweated into, and I've worked in a crawl space full of 90-degree bends with couplings on both sides of the fitting, meaning the first 90 leaks, so they cut it out and put in another with sweat couplings. Solder itself used to be half lead, which was much easier to work with. Starting in the 80s, regulations forced plumbers to use solder with a much lower lead content, 0.2% or less. Having never used the traditional high lead 50/50 solder, I can't personally comment, but my boss tells me it was far easier to use, and our company had about 6 months of frequent copper pipe leaks while everybody adapted to the new solder formula. In order to solder correctly, you have to hit a limited temperature window above the melting point of the solder and below the point where the flux burns off. Copper is more difficult and time-consuming than PEX. It's more expensive and requires more attention to detail. I think that one could maybe make the case for a homeowner piping in copper in an unfinished basement or crawl space, but thinking of copper sweated by an amateur lurking behind drywall, tile, or wainscoting makes me nervous. I really enjoy the podcast and learning about other building trades. Keep up the good work. Paul.
It was Patrick.
And I think you guys told me that was a bad idea,
too. Yeah, one thing to think about, too, is like even just the quality, because I used to watch my dad sweat copper a lot when I was a kid. And, he made it work, but it certainly wasn't like the by the books method that he used. And it is. It's kind of any kind of metal welding, soldering. There's some serious finesse to it, and it's hard to know when you're doing it right. But
I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree. You can learn to sweat pipes. It's not an unsurmountable thing, and you got to feel for it. But you have to do it some, right? You have to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
and you have to get the water out of the pipes. When he's talking about fittings that come apart, right? It's because there was water in there and it didn't get hot enough to really get a good solder joint, is my guess. But of course, there's a bunch of things you can do wrong. I would say go to the copper organization and read their guidance on how to sweat fittings. And if you follow the rules there and get a little feel for it, I don't think it's unsurmountable. I really don't.
No.
But you're going to need so many more fittings using copper than you would if you ran PEX, and just, you can loop that stuff all over the place and, bend it around things. And, you would need fittings for all of that if you were doing it in copper. It just saves so much time and the risk of burning your house down.
That was the other thing. Yeah. I was helping my brother fix some leaky copper in a wall behind his bathroom. And it was in this weird, awkward place that the studs were all charred from somebody trying to fix it once before, Yeah. The thing is, you got to learn to do it right, and you got to prepare the copper right, and you got to prepare your workspace right for safety and as much as for quality. There's stuff you can get, like the little fireproof blankets that you can put on the studs.
It's funny you bring that up, because like we've been talking a lot about secret weapon tools, and that's one I would put in my quiver.
Oh yeah, you got
so one. It's the one I have is made by Odie, which makes like all manner of plumbing things, right? And it's like a probably 6x8 fabric shield, and it's got a couple of grommets in the top, so you can put in a couple nails or screws to hang it somewhere if you need to. And you can put a freaking torch right on that thing for seemingly a long time and nothing will happen. It is an amazing material. I don't know what it is. They're going to tell us it's toxic probably in a decade, but
yeah.
But it works great.
Yeah. Also that, what do they call it? Plumber's bread, that stuff you can stick in the pipe to keep the water back. Because like you're saying, you got to keep pipes dry. Sometimes when you're at the bottom end of a run, it's impossible to get all the water out of there. So.
And as you're heating the tubing, you're actually drawing water to it, right? I found that when I'm having that problem, I get out my air compressor and I just start blowing air in there, and it goes somewhere and doesn't come back eventually, right?
Yeah.
Paul makes a good point. You can definitely get yourself in trouble with sweating copper fittings.
Yeah, I think this what I'm about to say is going to come up a little bit later in that other one of the other questions. Is it depends on your confidence level, your skill level. Some people, it's probably not going to be they may have other skills, or they're just a quick learner. You might be able to jump into a job like this if you've never done it before, but you just got to make sure you're learning the right methods.
It's funny, I might have more confidence in this ability of someone to learn this, because I was like probably 16 or 17 years old, and I was helping my uncle on a refrigeration install. We were installing central air conditioning in a person's home, and the refrigeration lines, at least in the old systems, were soldered, not brazed. So he turned me loose with a plumber's torch, soldering these refrigeration lines into this unit. And I could tell it made him completely anxious and losing his mind, but he let me do it. So if someone does that for you, you have a lot less fear about stuff, right? That's a gift.
Sure. Good teachers, good mentors, makes a big difference.
He wasn't, but he did let me do that. This comes from Christopher. Dear Patrick, I've been listening to the podcast for about 5 months. My father, Jim in Southern California, on the other hand, has been listening since the very beginning. He has also subscribed to the magazine as well as Fine Woodworking since the beginning. I listened to the podcast 2 days after you announced the T-shirt purchase opportunity and immediately bought 2, one for my father and one for myself. The T-shirts arrived Tuesday before Father's Day, so I could turn around and mail him his in time to arrive for the big day. With the recent liberation of the Fine Homebuilding podcast stickers, I don't know if you have any left and are still giving them out for pictures of the T-shirt wearers, but attached are pictures of me and my dad each wearing ours. If you could possibly send us 2 stickers, I can forward one on to him. Keep up the great work. I look forward to listening every week. Did you guys see these pictures, these guys wearing their shirts? It's fantastic, right? Yeah. I've already sent Chris his 2 stickers. Anyone else who buys a podcast T-shirt, I will send you a sticker. Absolutely. Send me a photo of you wearing it, and I will send those out. We got to put those pictures up on social media, right, Rob?
Definitely. I have to comment on something quickly, too. He said that his dad's been subscribing since the beginning. And we were talking about this the other day. We're starting to get ready. How many years has it now been that the magazine has been around? It's
going on 40, almost 40.
Yeah, it's going to be 40 in this winter. So exciting stuff. We got to think of some fun things to do.
Send people stacks of cash.
Really? send me some cash.
That's coming from your web budget, right, Rob?
Exactly.
This comes from Mike in Bend, Oregon. Did I say that right this time?
You did.
Thank God. I'm getting tired of making that mistake. He says, you asked for pics of spray foam failing. I just happen to have some. We came into Aero Barrier, a large new construction project, after it was spray foamed. Here's one that I took about 4 to 5 days after the spray foam was installed. You can see the foam has already started to detach from the framing. I posted this on Instagram and JLC reposted it, and boy, did it cause a stir. This one shows separation from a metal duct. Same project, foam was 4 to 5 days old. Here's a pic from a different project that shows a spot that was missed. This is in climate zone 5, so there's a condensation risk. I have many issues with spray foam. One of them is the human factor. According to a lot of comments from spray foam contractors, is that this was a bad install. Well, the contractor that did this job claims to be the best. Always a red flag. So if the human makes a mistake and it's a bad install, what's the fix? Uninstall it? Yeah, that's easy to do. I think the risk is way too high to rely on a human. Keep up the good work, guys and gal.
So does that mean we need robots to install foam in our houses going forward?
I mean, it just takes someone who cares, right? It's like you got to do a good job.
Well, I found an article on GBA from a few years ago by Paul Eldrenkamp and Rachel White talking about this. And they had, tips for getting a good foam install. And number 1 tip was select the right installer. How do you know the right installer? That's the thing, is it's just a challenging thing in general. It's like you've got to probably talk to other contractors, go look at some jobs. But yeah, working with somebody who cares enough to test their equipment, to dial in the ratio, to only work in when the conditions are right. Cause like, what are they, temperature I know is a big factor.
Yeah. I mean, also, the moisture content of the wood, if that's too high, that can cause some of this separation. But I think more likely the issue here was that they were just trying to fill the cavity all at once rather than going in lifts, because you really want to go, I believe, under 2 inches per lift. Otherwise, the exothermic reaction kind of runs away, gets a little hot, and then it will also shrink back and separate. So that may have been some of what was happening here. It's really hard to tell, but Somebody who knows more about it could diagnose it, probably just look at this picture and diagnose exactly what happened.
This is let's say complex chemistry, and chemical reactions can be affected by many things: humidity, temperature, how old the chemicals are, how warm they are in the truck, all these things. And God, it just seems like to me that the variables are too great. But on the other hand, like spray foam is sometimes the only solution, especially for retrofit work.
Yeah.
Do you guys disagree?
No, I mean certainly it's the right thing for a lot of situations, and when you say getting the right person on the job, the right installer, you figure they're mixing this stuff in the back of a truck with some dials, and that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is that there are, like you said, there are a lot of variables, and you got to get them right. I mean, another thing Paul Elsenkamp said in that article was do quality control testing on site. You can do ratio testing of the components. You can do test sprays. But I mean, the thing is, a lot of this stuff is people are working on a tight schedule, or you have installers that are maybe not trained as well as they should be. And you just got to get the right people doing the right job to get the job done right.
Matt, would you use spray foam in like your house?
If I didn't have any other option, I think I would. But I mean, to say there's sometimes no other option, yeah and no. I mean, it depends on how much work you want to do. I mean, you can always strip stuff further back to do something else, like dense pack cellulose or something. But yeah, often if you want to sort of leave what's there relatively intact, then sure. It's sort of the easy way to go in my mind,
But dense pack, because it's a fibrous insulation, should be installed over a vent cavity in a rafter situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like sometimes you just can't go that much deeper and to make the airspace and get enough insulation for thermal and vapor control. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you're right. If you put enough money at something, you can do it any way you want. But it's challenging to insulate roofs.
Yeah,
and closed cell is a
spaces.
good way. Sometimes.
Yeah, especially when you've got undersized rafters in a remodeling situation, and you're not going to be changing the roof, and you just want to get the most R value into a tight space.
This is from Tim in Brownsville, Indiana. I was running some numbers in my head of what it costs to build a code house or a better house or a passive house. I watched the Build Show guys, Matt, Steve, and the other guys, and they talk about a 1% cost increase for this or that. And it's at the end, it's like, let's just be honest and say instead of a code house for $200K, you can get a passive house for $250. If utilities for a code house are $300 a month for 30 years, that's $108,000 for utilities over 30 years. If you can save 90% of your energy and spend $30 a month for utilities, that's about $11,000 over 30 years. But if you run the numbers through a mortgage calculator, it will cost you $110,000 or more over the 30 years. So he's saying that the additional costs factored into the mortgage are going to cost you a lot less because you have compound interest over that amount of money. That, what was it, 5%?
Yeah, whatever. The extra $50,000 that you have to get for the mortgage. Yeah. So,
what do you think about this?
Well,
does Tim have a good point here?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it just from sort of like a home economic standpoint, I think he's got it right. I mean, because any money that you're sort of putting
financing
out up front,
yeah,
if you're financing that, or even if you're just spending it out of your own pocket, I mean, if you can get a better return on that, leaving it in some, investment vehicle, like it can work out in your advantage over time just to not spend that money. Because we're talking about relatively small sums. The savings that you're going to get from that passive house or whatever really are going to come after you've paid off the mortgage. Then you're banking all of that money. And by that time, you sort of run out of window for that to really make you any money, in the time that you actually need it.
I think you could argue, though, if you spent less on your utilities and invested that money or paid down the mortgage, right, those numbers are suddenly not accurate.
Yeah, if you are reinvesting those savings into your mortgage, then that's possible. Paying it off sooner can certainly work out. But those are all numbers that you have to run, you know.
Yeah, we those guys, and we often oversimplify the dollars and what it costs, and I think Tim has too. He's just taken it a different way, but these are more complicated equations than is often given.
Well,
Yeah.
You also have to think about, what are your priorities? If your budget's $200,000, do you give up some expensive details in your kitchen that are aesthetic, things on your wish list to get a better insulation job or a better heating system? I mean, just because these extra energy saving features cost more doesn't mean you can't work your budget and actually get a house that costs the same amount of money. You just got to choose your priorities. But another thing that a lot of people talk about on is this return on investment thing, but people don't talk about what's the value of comfort, what's the value of a durable house, what's the value of a house that's a healthier environment. And if you're talking a couple $100 extra a month cost to live in that house, is it worth it to live in to have a healthier and more comfortable house?
Tim's equation also assumes that energy costs are going to stay the same, and I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. I think energy costs will continue to go up because they have. And I don't think the utility companies are really excited about spending their own money to maintain infrastructure with more regular high wind events and storms.
Yeah. But there, as far as, building like a code minimum house, there are so many different ways to build a house to code, and you can get vastly different energy performance out of homes just building to code, depending on which way you frame the house. There's so many different things that you can do inside the code and get better performance. You don't.
Do you think it costs more? Do you think that
some of those things can cost more if you're doing exterior insulation instead of just putting it at, your R19 or R21 in the cavities, if you're doing exterior and a bit of interior, just because, you're going to have labor costs from the detailing, all that stuff. But there are plenty of people who know how to do that and have a system and can just knock that out. Takes a little more time than standard, but it's not that onerous, and the house will perform so much better.
And be more comfortable, to Rob's point.
Yeah, it'd be more comfortable without spending an arm and a leg.
Yeah, you were talking about a lot of it does have to do with the efficiency of the builder and the systems that they're comfortable using. A lot of the builders who are building these high performance homes are constantly looking at ways to not just improve the efficiency of the home, but improve the efficiency of the process of creating the home. Like, is it Jake Bruton? What he doesn't frame the interior walls until he gets the whole ceiling plane air sealed, and then the framing crew has to come in and
I think that is a fantastic detail. I really do. Talk about a great air barrier over the entire lid of your house like that. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And at first it seems like, oh man, you got to have the drywall guy back twice, but you know how much easier it is to drywall a single continuous ceiling as opposed to all the rooms that you have to cut in on. So you might actually end up finding cost savings by just changing the methods of putting these houses together.
It does complicate the sequencing. Suddenly you have to have ceiling electrical work all finished, and some guys could come in and recut that into the, but it means your subs are going to have to come more than once.
Yep.
Okay, this is from Andre. We recently moved into a 30-year-old house. Overall, it's in good shape. It's on Vancouver Island. It's in the temperate corner of Canada, basically Seattle's climate. We had the house inspected, and the report said that the HVAC system was working fine, but that a detailed report was outside the scope of the home inspection. The HVAC system in crawlspace is an energy nerd nightmare. It's a vented crawlspace with an HVAC system in it. When it got warm, I turned on the system, and there was very little cold air coming out to the upstairs bedrooms. The downstairs was great. So I went into the crawlspace. The ducting is what Matt would predict. leaky, oddly configured, and probably undersized to the upstairs rooms. I think I'm going to try to tune the system up. A, evaluate where the airflow is now. I'm going to have to get my hands on a velometer and an anemometer, I think. Tape the accessible duct joints, adjust the dampers, and check again. I'm betting I'm going to have to run additional trunk line upstairs. So, what do you think? Best regards, Andre. Did you guys see this HVAC system in a vented crawl space?
Mm.
It's a tragedy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can get away with vented crawl spaces in the Pacific Northwest, but you can't get away with it when there's ductwork in there.
Right. And it looked to be poorly insulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, I'm trying to find that picture again.
At least it looks like a clean work, not a
It's not
horrible
too
space
disgusting in there.
to work in, So if he is going to go in there and make those improvements, at least it's not going to be a total hardship.
So this is just plain tin ductwork in an unvented crawl space, which is just a nightmare from energy perspective. And obviously when it's hot out, the outside air temperature is going to raise the temperature of the refrigerated air in the ductwork, and of course it's not going to work as well. And the same is going to be true when it's a time to run the heating system. Like the cold outside air is going to be cooling off the heated ductwork. So I would love to see Andre seal up his crawl space and insulate the walls and just leave the ductwork largely as it is, and seal up the crawl space, insulate it, and leave the ductwork where it is. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, that could work. Then you're essentially turning that into a conditioned space, and it would probably be okay. But it sounds more like the issue is that it's so leaky that air is just not even making it to the second floor. So I don't know. I mean, we talked about, a month or so ago about what a AeroSeal, I think it was. I mean, is this a candidate for something like that?
Well,
Maybe.
Or
do you think it is just undersized ductwork? I mean, this stuff is notoriously leaky, and I have no idea what else they've got going on there, but a lot of times this stuff is just like a pan nailed to the joists, and that stuff just leaks like crazy. That's what's in my parents' house, and there's a lot of stuff I don't like about.
If you didn't do anything else, sealing the ductwork would have certainly helped with air delivery, right? And it would potentially boost the pressure to get it going, more of it to the upstairs.
So what would you guys do? Tape, mastic?
I like butyl tape.
Yeah.
I've tried mastic, and it doesn't really jive with my personality type.
Yeah, I can see that.
What would you do, Rob? You just weld that ductwork shut.
No, I think I'm with you with the butyl, with the appropriate tape for sealing them. But
you got to get the temperature of the crawl space more closely to the conditioned space. You can't leave this stuff outside.
No, honestly, dealing with the perimeter of the crawl space, I think, is more important than the ductwork. Other than the fact that he's not getting the air up to the bedrooms. I mean, I think getting that into the conditioned space would be your first priority.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It is a pretty temperate climate, though. I mean, the Delta T there is not extreme.
Did you see the video that Andre sent of his home? I put that in the script.
No, I didn't.
You guys should watch that. It is an absolutely beautiful piece of property. It is a lovely spot. Andre, I think you scored a win there, man. But seal up that crawl space first, and then I would say worry about improving the ductwork if you need to. My guess is a lot of your problems are going to be solved if you get that space closer to the temperature of the inside of your house. Any closing words, Jeff?
Didn't we recently have a discussion about unvented or vented crawl spaces in that climate zone, though? That was the preferred
Yeah, but not if you're running your HVAC system through it.
Yeah, basically, like it's.
I'm never
basically
asking you another
fine.
question, Jeff.
Yeah, it is a perfectly fine thing to do, so long as you don't have ductwork down there.
Yeah.
Is my
It's like
understanding.
putting your
anyway.
ductwork outside. Like, why not just run it on the outside of the house to the upstairs?
Yeah.
It's no different. I'm going to do that. It's going to be so much easier. The installs are going to be so easy.
It's kind of what mine is.
This comes from Pat. Hello, Mr. Patrick. I've been finding a lot of information on creating a sloped shower pan with dry pack mortar, for example, and then using one of the waterproofing systems like Schluter to waterproof it. This seems daunting to me. Do you know anything about tile-ready pans? It seems like a good alternative, but I don't know about the utility of these products. The one I'm looking at is for a barrier-free shower. Any insights into this tile-ready shower pan? Have you guys seen these things?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
I was introduced to these at the Builder Show a number of years back. Rob, do you want to describe what it is?
I mean, basically, it's a one-piece pan that you just drop in there, and you can run your tile right over the top of it. I mean,
yeah, you epoxy the tile right to the shower pan, and it's like, I don't know, some kind of hard plastic. And they make a bunch of different sizes.
I mean, it looks basically like the pan, something similar to the pan you'd get in like a three-piece fiberglass or acrylic shower that doesn't get tile. The difference is it's made to take tile. And I mean, my thought is that anytime you have no seams in the floor and made out of one continuous material like that, it's not a bad thing. I guess one of the main reasons why a lot of people don't go with a pan like this is because you're limited to the sizes that they offer, as opposed to building a custom shower to the size of your bathroom. And
yeah, but I mean, you can cut them to some extent and then extend with mud if you have to, to get
not
like
this particular one though.
Well, you have a link there for tile ready, but he talks about, I don't know.
Schluter's.
I mean, he's just talking about, he talks about Schluter. I mean, Schluter also makes ready-made shower pans, Vady. There's all kinds of stuff out there. It's not just limited to this one brand that, creates these, basically tile ready systems. But also, I mean, you can do a mud bed and put Schluter Curdy over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've used Schluter's polystyrene pre-sloped shower pan, and it is the composition of a cheap styrofoam cooler, and you then put this Curdy membrane over top of it with thin set mortar, and it worked great. It saves you a lot of labor, and if you're scared to dry pack a mud shower, it seems like a good solution. But as you guys suggested, you can somewhat alter them, but you certainly don't have the flexibility that you would with a super custom shower.
Well, and I get the impression that, and I kind of feel the same way sometimes. It's like when you bury something that needs to stay waterproof forever, and you have to do layers of different materials, different types of adhesives over it. I would imagine that's probably the stressful part that he's talking about, is that, if you're not
it's got to be right.
Yeah, it's got to be right. So if you've got something you could just drop in there and it's waterproof from the start, and I would think that's probably the main reason is it's less stress, less worry.
I'm going to ask our listeners, because none of us have used the Tile Ready product, which is a little different than the styrofoam products that Wedi and Schluter make. You don't use a waterproofing membrane because the thing is waterproof itself, and you have to use epoxy to secure the tiles to it because it's plastic. If any of you have used one of these, I'd love to hear your experience, and if you have one in your house, just if you've noticed any advantages or problems with it, we'd love to hear about it. We get great feedback when we ask folks for their input.
Yeah. The bigger issue I see with this is, he wants to build a barrier-free shower. And, in the past, I've personally dealt with situations where people decided they wanted this after the house was already framed, or it's, like a retrofit. And then you're cutting down joists and making a huge mess. And it's something that you can plan ahead for. If the floor system isn't already in, just use some undersized joists in the shower area. Instead of running 2x10s, run, doubled up 2x8s or something. And then, you'll be able to get the height that you need from the mud bed without having to do some kind of either cutting down joists or building up the floor system around it, to compensate. Like you end up with all kinds of weird floor planes, and it's just, it's it's something that can be really easily integrated in the beginning, but it's really hard to do after the fact.
Good point. Really good point. What do you guys think about the like barrier-free, curbless shower? Like anytime I've used one of those things, I seem to get water all over the floor.
Well, in some parts of the world, it's pretty normal to have a whole wet bathroom. I mean, we're not as used to that in our country, I think, but
the whole concept kind of freaks me out.
Well, the whole floor then is waterproofed. Like in Europe, they would just have essentially curdy over the entire floor, and then tile on top of that. Anything that gets wet is sloped a little bit to a drain.
Can I assume that they have like a wall discharge toilet and not a closet flange going through the floor that then you have to figure out how to waterproof?
Yeah, every house that I lived in over there, had wall hung toilets.
Yeah. Well, it certainly would make it easier to dry and clean the floor too if you had that.
You can mop under it easily.
I don't think you could do it with a conventional floor-mounted toilet. Like, how are you going to make that waterproof long term, right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like the idea of having your whole floor totally obstruction-free in a wet room like that.
Yeah.
But and that's a good point. I mean, he's talking about doing a barrier-free shower. He's going to have to waterproof something adjoining the this pan. So
right.
I kind of feel like if you're going to have to deal with waterproofing, maybe you'd go for the whole system for the whole floor to make it one system continuous. But that's just me.
Rob's all waterproofing all the time.
Yep.
This comes from Matt. Hey, podcast crew. I bought my first home in Fairfield, California about a year ago. The home is an older one, built in 1949. Isn't it interesting how Californians describe a 1949 house as an older one, right? After moving in, I noticed some interior wall cracks coming up out of the blue and some slight stucco cracks on the exterior. Some areas in the floor had begun to squeak more as well. I called out a foundation repair company for an estimate and to see what they would recommend. They came down, took measurements, and told me that the perimeter concrete foundation was fine. I had mentioned to them that I had also noticed the interior posts and piers were leaning. They advised me that it was a pretty straightforward repair, but that I would be spending a lot of money having them do it versus a remodel carpenter or handyman. For some time now, I've been diving into everything Fine Homebuilding. With the magazines, All Access subscription, and some of the printed material from the Taunton store. After reading some of the material from the remodel renovation text, I feel relatively confident in pouring new footings and setting new posts. My thought is to do one at a time, lifting the girders 1/8 of an inch with a 20-ton screw jack and supporting them with 6x6 crib shoring while I work. The piers look to be sinking, so a nice deep footing seems to be what is needed. Space in the crawl space is tight, so any tips or ideas on digging, removing dirt, and bringing in concrete would be much appreciated. I swear I've read something or heard about conveyor rollers. Because of the space concern, I think I will have to trench or remove some dirt to get everywhere I need to go. Do you think it's safe to be digging trenches near and around sinking piers to give myself clearance to get buckets in and out? I also count 9 piers or so that need to be fixed. Do you think I should consult an engineer before I get started to make sure that I do these in the correct order because of how many that need to be done? Is there anything else I should be thinking about before I get going? Am I totally in over my head and way more confident than I should be? Would love to get your thoughts. I'm attaching one photo of the sinking piers. Let me know if you need more information. Thanks, Matt.
Whoa. Those piers are leaning like 15 degrees.
They are some sort of screwy.
Yeah, I'm so familiar with the soil in our area, which is pretty reliable, sandy, gravelly soil. And I know that other parts of the country have to deal with weird stuff in their soil. I mean, I'd want to know what those things are sitting on top of before I decide what to do next.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first thing I thought when I looked at that was, were these put on disturbed soil? It just looked like
they shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, they really should not be leaning like that. I mean, it almost looks like the whole house shifted on the foundation, but he had somebody look at it, and that isn't what happened. Something is going on here, though. I don't understand exactly how those piers kind of shifted underneath of that. It almost looks like they all shifted like, 4 or 5 inches to the right.
I haven't looked it up, but it just occurred to me. Maybe there was an earthquake in Fairfield.
Well, at
some point.
It is possible that the entire foundation
just got a shake,
just kind of moved, and the house did, but the piers themselves stayed where they were.
And that seems likely if they were poorly attached, especially at the top, which looks like they were, right? That thing could just shoot right over top of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because let me describe what we're looking at here. We're looking at a very shallow dirt floor crawl space, and there's 3 or 4 concrete. To me, they almost look like those blocks that you put down that have the notches in them for 4x4 posts.
They don't look much better than that.
When you build a deck without digging footings, and there's a little chunk of wood on the top of each one of them that would support a framing member. It doesn't look like they sagged under the weight of the house, because the house looks nice and straight. It looks like they sank underneath their own weight, or like you said, if the soil was disturbed or if there was an earthquake that shook the soil. But they, I would certainly, the first thing I would want to do is dig down there, or get somebody who knows soils to take a look at the conditions. So maybe an engineer isn't such a bad idea.
Yeah.
Especially in California, where you have lots of seismic issues, right? Like, I don't think that the structural repairs of these piers is going to be the end of it in a place that is so earthquake prone.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw that, and I did think about the earthquake thing too, it seemed like a better solution possibly would be to run continuous spread footings, essentially wall to wall, as like a strip, so that thing couldn't shift back and forth, and those posts would stay upright.
So you'd build like a little stud wall to replace a number of the posts.
You could either do a stud wall, or you could do posts. You could do just about anything on top of that. But instead of just individual piers, you would have one long strip running wall to wall, actually like one strip for every
beam kind of thing.
Exactly. Sort of like a grade beam. And then you would run your posts up underneath the girders like that.
Yeah. As far as doing the job, I mean, access seems like the most challenging part of it, because it's pretty shallow down there. And what he was saying about conveyors, we actually just republished an old tip the other day that some guy has his favorite tool. He said, I bring it to every job site that have to work in basements and crawl spaces for getting material in and out. Those rolling conveyors that you see in like a factory building, a warehouse,
or like the bins go into the drugstore, right? Like from the truck, there's these kind of expandable conveyor belts with a ton of rollers on the top, right?
Yep. But there's certainly things you can do like that. The actual work wouldn't necessarily be any challenging work for someone who's handy, but they just need to know what the right work to do is. And I think getting some advice from a professional is certainly the right thing to do.
Another tip we republished recently was someone who had to do this kind of work fashioned a wood box and put ropes on 2 ends of it. And somebody outside the crawl space would pull out the box filled with dirt, and then the person inside could fill it up again when they pulled it back in, right? So you just keep pulling the thing back and forth. That someone doesn't have to belly crawl from the work area outside every time they need to dump out the spoil or bring in a bag of concrete, what have you.
Yeah. And the whole thing about digging the trenches to give him better access, that again depends on what the soil conditions are in there.
You want to dig as little as possible, right? Because it's just physically exhausting to dig on your stomach, right, Matt? Yeah. Isn't that what infantrymen do?
Yeah, you don't. My shoulders hurt just thinking about doing this.
I think your suggestion to get an engineer in there, Rob, to know what the right kind of work is a very good suggestion, because then Matt can decide if it's something he wants to take on. I think you're right. It's not real heady work. It's it's shoring up the house, pulling out the existing footing and pier, digging down to the footing size that's going to work, and physical dimensions, right? Like, my guess is if you had this loose soil that seems to be in there, you're going to need a much bigger footing than you would if the soil was well compacted. Yeah. So I think you need someone to analyze the soil, tell you how big the footings are to be, maybe suggest to the engineer Matt's suggestion, which is to think about other ways that are more resilient to support the center of this house.
Sounds good.
What do you think about this, Jeff? Is this something you would tackle?
This looks like a nightmare. I just keep thinking about the movie The Great Escape. You know, it's like you need to hire Charles Bronson. That's all.
I've worked in crawl spaces doing all kinds of things, and it is miserable work. You can't see. If the crawl space has been there for any period of time, you're going to find horrible things in there. I don't know what the climate of Fairfield, California is, but look out for scorpions and snakes, because people who are in cooling climates often described that critters go in there to escape the heat, and you will find them when you go in there, or they'll find you.
That's a good point.
Build an outdoor shower before you start crawling around down there digging too.
Yeah,
that's a good idea. Even if it's just a hose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you, these kinds of spaces, the only I always used to feel for electricians and plumbers, because they seem to be in these spaces more than anybody else. But electrical work, I wouldn't feel so bad doing in a space like this, but anything else, it's like,
well, cable bends, right? Like if you're running 20-foot lengths of pipe under there, that's going to be horrible.
Yeah. And just think about all the tools that you have to bring in when you're doing this kind of work. It's just got to think of how big a job it really is.
Yeah, that's a lot to dig with an e-tool, an army entrenching tool.
I've always found it valuable to like get some kind of pathway from the access to like the majority of the work, either with like plastic sheeting that's a reinforced plastic sheeting, or like carpeting, or just
Masonite,
something that,
some kind of
just
hardboard.
something that you don't have to drag your chest across the gravel, multiple times a day.
Definitely.
And then you can like put your tools on a cart and push them ahead of you or drag them. Like spend some time figuring out how you're gonna get in there and out of there, because it's gonna be a workout.
Maybe even install some grab bars on the joists so you can slide yourself along more.
Yeah.
Once again, like in The Great Escape, you need that cable to pull yourself along. You guys got anything else?
No.
Rob, do you want to remind folks about our survey, and have we had any response?
I actually have to check in with our survey specialist, because I don't.
Isn't that your job?
No, I don't have access. I don't have access to that data. We have a survey person, a survey and data person at the company who does it for all of our brands, and that's Christina. I gotta go. I'll check in with her after we're done recording this, and so we can update people next time. But yeah, we've got a link to the survey on the podcast notes page, and we'd love to hear your feedback. I mean, I know we get lots of emails and messages from a lot of you, but the survey is a nice, quick way for us to get some real information about what we're doing well, what we could be doing better, and so that we can make these shows the best we can.
And tell them the best part.
The best part is that you enter a contest to win a podcast
He doesn't sound
T-shirt.
all that convinced, does he, Matt?
No, but yeah, we'll be doing drawings for podcast T-shirts. So if you want to get a nice podcast T-shirt, like one of Patrick's favorite shirts there.
I'm wearing my Keep Craft Alive shirt today. But as Christopher pointed out earlier in the show, if you buy a T-shirt and you send me a photograph of you wearing it, I will gladly send you a sticker. So it's like, wow, what a bonanza.
I do want to remind people one other thing. I know we got some compliments on this recently about doing some of the organizational work on the job on the website, but we've got the painting guide, which has been up for a little while now, and organizes all of our best painting articles and videos in one place. And we're in the middle of doing the roofing guide right now, so that's going to be up soon too. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have all of our top topics, all the major projects that people want to tackle in a typical construction project.
And those guides, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, include video and magazine pieces and web blogs, and all this stuff is compiled. And if you have one of these project areas going on, you can get all those resources in one spot. Is that correct?
Yeah, the whole point is that we're organizing these things so that it's based on type of project or phase of construction, and we've collected it in a very organized way so that you can start out with the introduction, and then you can get into tools and materials, and then you get the deep how-to articles and videos on the specific topics. And we've even pulled in some excerpts from some of our best construction books, so you're actually getting new content that wasn't previously on the website or in the magazine.
And folks get the chance to try this, right? If they sign up for an all-access membership, and then if it's not for them, they don't have to pay for it, right? You get a free trial.
Yeah, we have. Well, first off, anything on our website, the way our membership works on the website is that every month people who visit the website get a certain number of articles for free before they even hit the membership login. But there is certainly a trial membership, so you get to log in, try out the member portion of the website for a couple of weeks before you have to commit to it. So
cool. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Hey, stay safe, everybody. Thanks for listening, and happy building. Stay safe, stay safe.